Good day, and welcome to episode 47 of the Aaron Wayne podcast. I got my red light going today. Bought these LED lights because that's the kind of thing I do. I got a blue one over here and a red one over here. Just trying to confuse people that might be colorblind. Figured I'd squeeze in a quick podcast. It's Friday night. My lady and I are, she's coming home here soon, and we're going to go out, maybe go to get some tacos. Nice little Friday night. I hope you guys are doing well. Previous podcast that I've recorded, it got a little heavy, man. I was thinking a lot about monetary systems, fiat currencies, U.S.-China relations. I mean, talk about a snooze fest. But, I don't know. It was, sometimes you just got to get stuff off your chest. You just I think these things and listen to people talk about them, and I just wanted to crush it a little bit. I got a whiteboard over my shoulder in, my new podcast space, and, I got nothing on it. So all it does is reflect my lights, and the lights in this room are controlled by a Google Home. Are you listening to me, Google? And the Google Home doesn't work. Every time I say, let's see if it, oh no, wait, I unplugged it. Never mind. Every time I say, hey Google, turn on the lights, it says that it's not connected to the internet. And I'm like, what's the point of this? Why do I even have this thing? But do I want more? Do I want to have little pods that can play music throughout my entire house? I feel like we miss the, I feel like we miss the realization that as a modern working class person, you can live in a world where you are the king of a fiefdom, and you can just bark commands at these stupid things that never work. But when they do work, and you say, hey Google, I did this for a while. My dogs, I've never had a doorbell. In the entire time that I've lived with my wife and the dogs that I have, never have had a doorbell. Somehow, when my dogs hear a doorbell, they go bananas. And so when a doorbell will play, I don't know, you tell me if this is mean. I'm going to tell you what I do. You tell me if this is like mean or unethical. If we're watching TV and the doorbell plays on the TV, my dogs will, specifically my Chihuahua, and I think it's just like somewhere in his epigenetic profile, he knows what a doorbell means. It means that he's got something he's going to chew the shoes off of. But he'll start barking, and I'll say, hey Google, play the sound of a wolf. And he'll be like, oh, and he does that thing where he like turns his head, you know what I mean? But he stops barking. But it's like you'd think there'd be this Pavlovian response that if he were to hear a wolf enough times that he would eventually think that the wolves are at the door every time there's a doorbell. Turns out not. Turns out he still barks every time there is a doorbell. What am I supposed to do about that? I don't know. Delicious water. Speaking of technology, most amazing $20 purchase I've made in the last year. Wireless keyboard, because I have a MacBook and I can use the keys, and the keys feel really nice, but it's like the wrist pad on I'm gonna talk about it anyway. The like where your heel strike is of your hand on the keyboard, it's like it doesn't fit right, and also the computer's a bit too close to my face. I'm nearsighted. Sorry, I wasn't born perfect. So now I can push my computer away, and I got a little clicky mouse. Little wireless mouse. Beautiful. Probably made by slave labor in China, but nonetheless, I have it now, and it's useful to me in a sort of fiefdom way. I think I've talked about having a fiefdom in previous podcasts. I made this joke at my vet school yoga class that I was going to start a cult. And they thought it was hilarious. And then I realized like that actually might be a weird joke to make. It's a joke that I've made with my wife before. We've watched, have you seen Wild Wild Country? If you haven't seen that, the Bhagwan Osho, what is his name? Bhagwan Rajneeshi? this Indian guy who had a bunch of disciples in India, brought them to the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and they built this really intentional, for a long time. This is why I don't want to start a cult, because, they start off real groovy, and then next thing you know, someone's, putting poison in the salad bar, which is what happened at this one. Spoiler alert. But, yeah, so I've made jokes like that with my wife, like, hey, I'm going to put on robes, grow my hair really long, and speak in very cryptic phrases, speak in parables. Then I made the joke at this this class that I teach. They thought it was hilarious. Thought it was funny. Hilarious is a stretch. They didn't think it was hilarious. They giggled a bit, but it wasn't like nervous giggling. Like they thought it was genuinely funny. And then as soon as I said it, I was like, because that happens in the yoga world. Some of the people I follow online, they have, they do like men's groups, and they do retreats and all these things, and I'm always like grappling with this idea in the yoga space of, are people, I have a really well-attuned bullshit detector where I can, I don't know, maybe I'm off base in a lot of these instances, and I'm not thinking of any specific individual. So if anybody's listening to this that does these sorts of things, I'm not really talking about you. I'm talking about the general sense of these things. It seems like, dude, I look crazy with this red light. I just saw a glimpse of myself in the camera. I look like I have hives or something. Not hives, but like sunburnt. That's what I was trying to say. Whatever. But a lot of these people in the yoga world, they go through these phases of using. You know what it says in the sutras? I'll tell you, even though you didn't ask. The Yoga Sutras was the first real codification of what yoga is, and in the first couple lines of the sutras, it says Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is Sanskrit for yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations in your mind, which I think is a really beautiful way to describe what yoga is. And that's how I approach it, which is the monkey brain flutters and we live in the brainstem, and our culture encourages us to live in the brainstem. But yoga is a cessation of those sort of impulsive flutterings of the mind. That's chitta vritti, Citta-Vritti. I think there's two T's in vritti. And in the sutras, it talks about, I think what yoga has given me is the understanding that a lot of these ancient texts and scriptures and holy books, they, at least the way that I access them, and I think that the most useful way to access them is through understanding that they're metaphorical, and that these things are not literal truths, they're metaphorical truths. So, the death and rebirth of Christ is the hero's journey, right? See Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. And I think in the sutras, back to my point about cults, the sutras tell us, like, you can develop these superpowers as yogis. And they talk about, in different schools of yoga, they talk about like mind reading and levitating and all these different things. And I think that if you take those literally, you look at that and you're like, well, that's not possible. That's not true. Can't happen. And I agree. But I think that these ideas are pointing to metaphorical truth, which is, if you are tuned in and you're clear and you're not distracted by things, then you have the capacity to understand what people are thinking. So that's sort of like mind reading. And the idea of levitating, like, I think that you can understand that metaphorically, meaning that you feel light in your body. Like a handstand, you kick into a handstand, you feel like you're flying, especially if you land it. You're like, it feels like levitation, even though I've never levitated. I learned from David Blaine, not from him, but that was a trick that he did for a while in his street magic thing, where he uses the positioning of his body and his feet to make it look like he's levitating like 6 to 8 inches off the floor, which looks very legitimate. And it's such a simple trick that you don't even like. It's like deceptive. It's highly deceptive. And I learned that when I was like maybe in high school from some like CBS show or whatever that was like magic uncovered, and I was doing it everywhere, and I was doing it really dramatically too. Like I had my arms out, and I was like, all right, I'll try, guys. I'll see. I'm kind of tired today, but I'll try to see if I can levitate. And then I would levitate, and it would freak people out. All I'm doing is standing on one foot on my tippy toes and balancing while my other foot covers up the fact that I'm on my tippy toes on my other foot. Does that make sense? Just Google it. Check that on YouTube, how to levitate on YouTube. But I think that when your body is open, loose, and full of space, you do feel a lightness. And back to my point, which I said I was back to earlier, but now I'm finally back to the point. So here I am making that point. Sutras say that you develop these superpowers, and you can use them for manipulation and ill intent. And I think that there's a book by a guy named Robert Greene called The 48 Laws of Power. And I read that book, and it's one of those books that when you read, you think it's a book that when you read it, you sort of hide the fact that you're reading it, because what I wanted to know is not how to use power over people, but to have a deeper, because there are things that I'm naturally good at. And one of those things is interpersonal dynamics and persuasion. I'm just like, for whatever reason, that's like a skill. It probably has to do with the fact that I got in trouble a lot when I was a teenager, and I had to convince my mom not to take my PlayStation away. But so I have that natural gift. And then I had read this book by a guy I heard on Tim Ferriss's podcast named Neil Strauss. That's who his name was. Neil Strauss wrote this book called The Pickup Artist. And I read it because I didn't really know what the book was about, but I knew that listening to this author on Tim Ferriss's podcast, I was so enamored with his articulation and the way that he thinks, the way that he works, the way he like shuts down the internet and like batches his time and is very effective and efficient, and a really like good speaker. So I got the book, read the book, and it was about these guys, this whole underground world of people, entirely men to my knowledge, that are using psychological tools in order to date more women. And they have programs and workshops and things that they do. And I have a lot of empathy for young men who just don't have the social acumen to be able to establish romantic relationships. I have a lot of empathy for those people. But this book made it seem as if most of that is, pretty misogynistic and oriented around not necessarily establishing relationships, but in accumulating large amounts of mates. So that's kind of weird, but read the book if you're interested in psychology, because he ends the book talking about how like his awakening to what this world was up to. Back to my point, to get back to my point from the point that I jumped away from earlier. I read 48 Laws of Power shortly thereafter. Again, not because, I didn't read Pickup Artist because I wanted to be a pickup artist. I've been in a relationship with my wife. In March of this year, I will have been with my wife for 19 years. Isn't that crazy? I'm 33 years old. Long time. So that wasn't the interest for that book. It was the author that brought me into that. But then I read The Pickup Artist, and I thought, okay, there's some people who are naturally good at establishing connections with people. And so another writer that I follow named Ryan Holiday, he wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, which is a utilization of, it's a modernization of Stoic philosophy in understanding that we have the capacity to control how we view situations instead of being able to control situations. I think that's a subtle distinction, but a huge difference. And he was mentored by a guy named Robert Greene. And so Robert Greene has written 48 Laws of Power. He wrote a book called Mastery, and he approaches his books with the historical record of, Machiavellian style princes and royalty, as well as business people and so forth. And so I read the 48 Laws of Power, not so that I could exude my power, but to understand how people are either consciously or unconsciously using these tools in order to achieve their means in the world. And so now I feel like I've set the stage to come back to the point that I was starting to make, which is I think a lot of these people in the yoga world that are attempting to gather a following, which in some ways I try to do. And why do I do it? I don't do it for finances, because for the last year during COVID, I didn't get paid almost anything for yoga. So it's not for finances. There is an ego aspect to it. Like, I appreciate, it makes me feel good when people think that I am providing value to their lives. So maybe there's a bit of ego to it. Yeah. So I don't know why I want to have people listen to me. I don't know. Talk to my therapist about it. But the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of people are seemingly, going back to my bullshit detector, a lot of these people seem to really be full of it. Like that. And I think that they're either consciously utilizing the tools of yoga in order to gather a following and then create some sort of like new yoga, or, resonating with the archetypical human, or like all these different things. Like, I think there is need for a modernization of yoga. I also think that there is a need for a modernization of mankind. So like there is a place for these programs, retreats, groups, master class kind of stuff. I think there is a place for these, but I feel like everything's been turned into a product instead of a community. And I think that when your finances when you're required to create a product that is utilizing, it's like, it's always been this thing in the yoga world, which is I have the skill set to share with you tools that will enrich your life and your community. But will you give me some money for it? It's just like this weird thing, and I really don't know how to grok that whole problem. But the tools of yoga, the ability to be clear in your communication with people, is an immensely powerful tool. And some people do that naturally. Other people do that through, reading books about how people communicate their intent very clearly and how to do it even more clearly. And I think the sutras warn against that. The sutras say, like, you can use these powers and for evil. And, if I were to start this make-believe cult, it's like, that's what happens to these guys. Typically guys, almost always guys. Which speaks to the motivations of men and women, right? Like, for some reason, men, myself included, I want to be in front of the room telling everybody like how I want everybody to know how smart I am. And I think that I think it's fun sometimes, but I think ultimately, like, that's a fallacy. And I think that's what the trap that a lot of these gurus fall into. And it's also really popular for people to say, like, I'm not interested in being a guru. But it's like, really? There's a part of me that wants to be a guru. There's a part of me in there that's like, like Wim Hof, for example. If you don't know who that is, W-I-M, last name Hoff, H-O-F-F. I follow his breathing practices, and he also talks a lot about cold exposure and all these different things. And it's a powerful practice. But he took that practice from a Buddhist tradition called Tomo, which is like a breath of fire, not the breath of fire that you might know, Kapalabhati, which is a different type of breath. But the from Tomo, it's basically what Wim Hof is doing, which is like breathe fully in and then fully out. And you do that 25 or 30 times. And then on the last exhale there, you hold on empty for an extended period of time. And then full breath in for about 15 seconds. and then rinse and repeat for as many cycles as you're interested in engaging in. But, there's this personality that wraps around him. And I don't, early days, because I was into this guy like maybe 5 years ago from podcasts I was listening to. I don't think that he got into this game because he wanted this. I think he genuinely wanted to help people. He had trauma in his life that is explained if you follow him, or if you look for him, he can explain that to you instead of me. But he thought that the tools of breath and movement and cold exposure could help to cure a lot of the ails of humanity. And I think I agree with that. I think that that's a really profound, simple step that can create a lot of relief from suffering in the world. And he started that out, and it seemed really genuine. And then, I tuned back in with some of his interviews over the last year, and he's like embodied this Iceman thing, like this. It's like we become the image that people ask of us. And so like there's some phase shift that happens through the process of gaining more people. And I'm conscious of this because, in no way is my podcast or my very localized recognition of my of who I am, whether it's in public school or in my yoga teaching. I'm aware that like I have recognition in my communities that I engage in, and as the podcast grows, that's a third place where I gain recognition in a broader, like non-localized community. And I'm very conscious that as people become more influential in the communities that they serve, the community starts to manifest out of them what it is that the community is looking for, because that's just psychology, right? Like it's positive reward. The things that are incentivized through behavior, like if you study behaviorism, what was that guy's name? It's the father of behaviorism. He did a lot of research with rats, and he would like have them do really wild stuff, like basically trapeze acts with rats. Oh, what was that guy's name? I don't know. Look it up. Just search behaviorism rats, and this guy's name will come up, and it'll come to me as I'm talking. But positive rewards, whether someone is consciously or unconsciously giving you a positive reward for something, it will reinforce in you unconscious behaviors. And the tools of yoga can help clarify for us, like, am I doing this because this is authentic, or is this something that's being pulled out of me? Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. But you see these people that are, people change the more awareness that comes to them, and they feel the weight of the crowd around them. I mean, a very tangible, relatable example might be if you've ever been in a position where you're speaking publicly. If you can get past, like, if you're the type of person who gets anxious when you speak publicly, which happens to me from time to time. But if you can get past, like, oh my goodness, everybody's looking at me, which some people can't get past without a lot of practice. But once you get past that, then you can really be in the flow of the experience of speaking publicly. And the first thing you notice is, are people paying attention to me? And when you notice that people are paying attention to you, you know that you're saying the thing that they need to hear or want to hear. And when people are tuned out, you automatically, if you're paying attention to your experience as a speaker, you can tell when whatever it is that you're saying is no longer resonant with the group that's hearing it. And then you start to experiment. There was an experiment that was done, and it was it might not have been an experiment. I don't know. I'll tell you this anecdote. So there was a professor. He was professing all of his professors, and oftentimes speakers, when they speak, they'll like walk around a room, right? A good speaker will move instead of just standing in one space. And when this speaker would go to one corner, the students would look up and pay attention. And then as soon as he started to walk to the other corner, they would like, get on their phones or play on their computers or whatever. And so they unconsciously put this guy in a corner because the only time that they would pay attention to him was when he was standing in this specific corner. And he wasn't aware that he was doing it. That's the crazy thing about this anecdote. Be it true or not, I don't even know where I learned this from. So, I don't know if I read it, saw it, listened to it, heard it, whatever. But though that's what I'm talking about, is that the community unconsciously manifests something out of the speaker that the speaker is no longer conscious of. So we got to be mindful of that. And when I start my cult, I will be mindful. It's obviously a joke. Don't take this out of context. I'm not starting a cult. Does anybody ever start a cult and they're like, you know what? I'm gonna start a cult. I don't think that's how it happens, man. I don't think that's how it happens. I think that somebody starts with like really genuine intent, like Osho. And then next thing you know, you've got 7 Rolls Royces and 6,000 acres in the Pacific Northwest. I don't even know how big 6,000 acres is, but next thing you know, that's what happens. Start out with some, esoteric, metaphorically true truths, and 3 years down the line, someone's poisoning the salad bar. Oh. All right, I'm gonna wrap it, guys. I'm gonna be having some din with my lady. So, oh man, I did this last podcast. I wanted to have the music ready and primed up so that I can just exit smoothly out of the podcast, but I didn't. And oh no, but I think I have it close. We might have music coming in here in a second. Yes. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Follow along, AaronWayneYoga.com, at AaronWayneYoga for all the socials. Get off social media for a little while after you check out my Instagram page. Teaching a class at Crimpers if you're local to the New River Valley. Also teaching a couple classes at Imbalance, and yoga teacher training is hitting in January. Hit me up. Peace.